Welcome back to Living the Wiccan Life. In part 2 of our episode, we continue our interview with Donald Frew, interfaith representative of the Covenant of the Goddess, and one of the best-known pagan figures in the international interfaith movement.
Gerald Barney sent a bunch of questions around to many of us who participated in the Parliament asking about ideas about progress. What did our faith traditions have to say about progress going into the 21st century? And there were all these questions about science and women and material progress, and I'm looking at these questions going, these don't relate to us. What am I going to do with these? But I have to answer them. And once I got into it, I couldn't stop and wrote just 40 questions. I wrote like 40-some pages of answers. And it was wonderful to have that prompting to engage my own faith tradition. And also it brought to the fore all the more just how much paganism is different or something else. I'm fairly aggressive about saying that the mainstreaming of the neo-pagan movement doesn't mean we become like them. It means that we expand the idea of what's mainstream to include us.
Yes.
And one of the things that was coming up over and over again in these questions were, how do you relate to women? The problem of women as second-class citizens in your community. Well, we don't have that problem.
That's true.
How do you reconcile the problems between science and religion? Well, we don't have problems between science and religion.
That's true.
What do you do about the language in your tradition that calls for violence against other faiths? Well, we don't have that. It was just sort of this long litany of not us, over and over again, and I was really just surprised just how different we are as a faith tradition, and that's something that constantly surprises them.
Yeah.
That it's possible to be religious in such a different way.
I think you talked earlier about how some of the newer people in the movement don't remember some of the difficulties of the past. I think also some of the newer people in the movement don't necessarily appreciate just how different we are.
They don't have anything to measure it against.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I thought Margot's talk today was really important about sort of her view from the first edition of Drawing Down the Moon down to the present.
Yes.
And one of the things I noticed is that most of the people in the room were the people who remembered the first book. And they wanted to sort of talk about, how things have changed.
Yeah.
It wasn't the younger people. And everybody says that. I know in the feminist movement they say these people don't remember the struggle that we went through. It's the same sort of thing that we're experiencing. And it takes a while for stuff to become history.
That's true.
It's too recent for it to be history. In another 10, 20 years, people will be looking back on the 60s and 70s and 80s and wanting to learn about them.
Yeah.
It takes a while for that to come about.
Well, let me ask you. You're wearing your COG button, and you mentioned COG a little bit. Would you care to take this opportunity to talk about COG a little more?
COG was created to be a networking organization for witches of all different traditions, maximizing the autonomy of the covens. It doesn't have spiritual authority over the groups. One huge advantage to this is that because it's the most inclusive craft organization out there, it's the most representative. It's not a single tradition, it's not a single person's teachings. And a lot of the interfaith people realize that they want to come to the Covenant of the Goddess because of that. It's one of the things that I found fascinating recently is people have been asked in the organization, what do you think is the value of the organization? What's the most important thing we do? And people constantly say interfaith. Interfaith is one of our largest budget items. So people really see the Covenant as a tool that they can use to affect change in the world. Recently, we sort of okay, we're doing the interfaith thing, what next? And it started to step into the political activism realm to say, how can we be active in the political sphere while still being a 501c3 organization? One way is to do education. And you see it a lot at this conference, the whole spirit, Gaia and the spirit of activism, trying to look at that kind of engagement. And having a large national networking body makes it a lot easier to do that. And COG has staying power, since it's been around since '75. So one of the things that I wanted to create and didn't get a chance to do was a flyer saying, people will say, well, what do I get if I join COG? And I wanted to say, no, the question is, what does COG already do for you? Because everything that we do is not for our members, it's for the craft. And all the work that's been done on public relations, the work educating the media, the work on legal work, clergy credentialing, the interfaith work, all these things have been to the benefit of everybody, not
Mhm.
just the COG members. So I always want to turn it around and say, this is a way you can support the craft.
Mhm.
Not something you're going to get out of it. At least only in the big sense you will, but not in the immediate sense. And so I'm hoping that message will get around to people and have more people join the organization. We'll see.
Very good.
Mhm.
We've kind of answered this question already, but I
Okay.
ask everybody, so I have
Mhm.
to ask you too.
What's my favorite color? No.
Well, what is your favorite color?
Probably a very deep shade of purple.
I think that's probably a very popular color in pagan circles, and
Mhm.
and one of my favorites.
Mhm.
But the question I ask everyone is, what do you feel is most important for the future in our community?
I would say probably the single most important thing is being aware of and staying true to our roots, to our identity as pagans.
Mhm.
Getting to that idea of mainstreaming. That we do have a unique way of being religious. We do have a unique culture.
Mhm.
And I have a great fear of seeing that diluted
Mhm.
as both as people try to present themselves more, might try to be more mainstream, but also, and I hate to say it, but because I have lots of friends who've published with Llewellyn, but the tendency in the popular publishers for, because you're publishing for a mass market, for people to want to say, well, no, let's not talk about that.
Mhm.
Let's pull this out of, let's not talk about deity possession. Let's sort of pull some of these things out for a book that's going to a mass audience, the self-censoring that's going on. But at
Well,
the same time, when so many people are still getting their craft from
Mhm.
those books,
Yeah.
it means they're getting it in they're getting kind of a watered down version.
Well, we
And-
have a motto,
Mhm.
and I shouldn't be interrupting you, but I'm
No,
going
please.
to. And I'm going to try to say this right, because I
Mhm.
mess it up all the time.
Mhm.
But if you want to have the power of the printing press, you need to have one.
Mhm.
And that aspect of controlling our own image
Yeah. Mhm.
is so important.
Mhm.
And
Very
it
much.
really speaks to what you were saying about not losing ourselves.
And it's controlling our own identity.
It is.
Changing who we are. And that's part of that is knowing that history that we talked about, the history of the
Mhm.
struggle, I think is important.
Mhm.
But part of it is really a lot of us from an earlier generation getting into the craft, and I'm certainly not from the
Mhm.
earliest, but earlier generation, we went through that whole process. Not only was it hard to find a group,
Mhm.
but you did a lot of research yourself. You researched ancient pagan cultures. You researched mythology. You developed a fairly both broad and deep knowledge of paganism beyond whatever trad you got involved in.
Mhm.
And I think what's happening nowadays is people tend to get a book, and the book has the sum total of the knowledge.
Mhm.
Say, no, that book's really embedded in a much broader context, in a
Mhm.
much deeper history. And I think to really understand who we are ourselves, to understand
Mhm.
our practice and get the most out of it, you really have to have that context.
Mhm.
And so I'd say the most important thing facing us is to not lose that context, to make sure that we study it, that we understand it, that we hold on to it, even as we become more a part of the mainstream in America.
Final question.
Mhm.
If people wanted to learn more about the Covenant of the Goddess,
Mhm.
or about the interfaith organizations that we've talked about,
Mhm.
where would you send them?
It's about as easy as it gets to get to the Covenant of the Goddess, cog.org, cog.org. To get to the United Religions Initiative, URI.org. To get to the Interfaith Center at the Presidio, little different, interfaith-presidio.org. To find information on the Parliament, it's the Council for a Parliament of the World's Religions, cpwr.org. So fairly straightforward URLs. Lots of information on those sites. I would also plug a site for a project that I have been involved in
Mhm.
or created. We did an interfaith sacred space design competition, inviting people to imagine what genuinely interfaith sacred space would look like.
Oh my.
And we got 160 designs from 17 countries. And the material going out to the people participating all included information about paganism. So a lot of the designs explicitly include
Oh.
space for neo-pagans and witches. And all of that's online at interfaithdesign.org.
Wonderful.
So people can look at all of it.
And are you going to be in Australia for the next Parliament?
Absolutely. I would
Wonderful.
never miss one. And I would encourage people to go. There
Mhm.
is absolutely nothing like a Parliament of the World's Religions.
I understand that the experience is for just people attending
Mhm.
is extremely rich and varied and unlike anything else.
Well, and as you noticed, once you get one of us started about it, it's pretty easy to keep us going.
Yes.
As witches, I would
Mhm.
say, about the Parliament, there's something extremely magical about the Parliament, which is that for, depending on the Parliament, 7 to 9 days, about 8,000 people,
Mhm.
representing virtually every religion on earth, get together in one place and form a community. And they share stories, and they share meals, and they learn about each other, and everybody's there, absolutely committed to what they believe, and really into learning about other faiths and meeting new people. So this community forms that's a microcosm. You say, this is what the whole world can be. You know, and if magic is
Mhm.
about creating in a microcosm or one form what you want to happen on the macrocosm, I see this as a magical act. You know, the Parliament is a magical act to work to do a ritual to create that world. And so people coming to that with that intent, you know,
Mhm.
and putting that energy into it, you know, the more of us who do, the better.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And I hope you have a wonderful evening and enjoy the rest of the convention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed our program and that you'll join us again next week for another episode of Living the Wiccan Life. Until then, may you blessed be. Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis, and I'm very pleased to announce the publication in paperback of Witch School's Lessons for the First Degree. Available now for pre-order from witchschool.com and coming soon to a bookstore near you, together with lessons for the second degree and lessons for the third degree.